This is WTAW.com, and today we're going to take an opportunity to look at the Bryan Independent School District bond issue, which is coming up on the November 4th ballot. We'll remind you, like so many things that are going to be on their ballot, it's way down there, so we want you to stay till the end of the ballot because there are questions that are certainly important. So our guests that we have today, Dr. Tommy Wallis, who's the Superintendent of Schools for BISD, Amy Drozd, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, Dr. Doug Wunneburger, who is the President of the BISD Board, and Dr. Brandon Jayroe, who's the Principal at SFA. Joining me also is Bill Oliver, News Director at WTAW. Bill, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Where I want to start with this conversation is really the genesis of how this bond issue came to be. And from what I understand, really the genesis of all this began with looking at the grade structures, particularly in the elementary schools, and the recommendations that were made to change the format of the elementary schools to add intermediate level and to modify middle school. So if we can talk about that background a little bit.
Right. I think, well, the genesis of the whole program came about because of a strategic plan. When I arrived 4 years ago, there was no strategic plan that was updated in Bryan ISD. And so the Board of Trustees then allowed me to move forward with a strategic plan committee. And so that's really how this got started. And so through the strategic planning committee, we had a cross-section of community members, roughly 150, and they were all assigned and put into different tenants, if you will, and there were 5. But one of them was facilities. And through that facility study, what wound up happening is they asked for a architectural needs assessment. So PBK Architects came down from Houston and did a study of all of our facilities in our district, every building, and then came back with a recommendation, with the findings of the facility study with a 3-inch binder. With things ranging from 1 being the most severe and needs to be fixed right now to a 5 that would have been, you've got 5-10 years to get this fixed. And so they reported that to as the facilities committee, and then we reported that to the Board of Trustees and gave the Board of Trustees all the information that the facilities committee and the PBK architects found.
But before all that, wasn't there, I don't know whether it was a parallel track or somehow in conjunction with the idea of reorganizing the grade levels?
That came out of this study because what happened, that's a great question, and I had to answer that question, a long version to make sure people understood how it came about. Then the facilities committee took those findings, began to look at it, and then that's where the idea of grade realignment came out. Dr. Wunneburger was on the committee. Dr. Jayroe was on the committee as well. And then they began to discuss grade realignment. And so then through that meeting and several that followed, the idea of grade realignment did come out. And so the facilities committee went to the school board with a resolution basically and a plan that said we would like to have our schools to be pre-K through 4, 2, 5, and 6 intermediate schools, 2, 7, and 8 middle schools, and then our 2 traditional high schools, Bryan and Rudder, 9 through 12, and then Bryan Collegiate and Mary Catherine Harris.
Let me ask Dr. Wunneburger then, what, to me, it's sort of a chicken or the egg coming first thing. Was the facility recommendations driven by the grade realignment, or the grade realignment driven by the facilities?
Well, it's an interesting way to put it, chicken or the egg question, I guess. But Dr. Wallis is correct in stating that we did not go into the process planning on a grade realignment. And as a matter of fact, when the subject was first brought up, there was nowhere near a unanimous notion that we should do that. It was through discussion within the committee, and having sat through every meeting, I experienced the whole process, and this didn't happen in one night. I don't remember exactly what meeting it was that we came to that conclusion, but the grade realignment was suggested and then supported and argued for, and the committee eventually did come to a unanimous to support it unanimously. And for me, I was actually one of the last holdouts because there isn't an effect when students change schools, so you want to minimize that as much as possible. However, Dr. Jayroe actually pointed out that because of the mobility we have in the district, that we're actually reducing the number of times students change schools because they're only going to one of two intermediate schools
in lieu of
instead
15
of
elementary schools.
15 elementaries.
Can we talk about it from the standpoint of transportation now, moving these students to those campuses? What kind of a projection do you have as far as the costs are concerned there?
Oh, it's actually going to be relatively a wash because the kids are still going to go somewhere, and we're going to have to eventually, if the bond passes, we will have to rezone our elementary schools, because through the bond package, you'll notice that Milam Elementary School will be closed as an elementary school and then repurposed for a Mary Catherine Harris School of Choice. So in essence, what you have is every kid still going to go to a school that's going to be one less elementary school. So when you begin to look at the rezoning issues that we have, we go through the rezoning issues, I think it's going to be pretty much a wash.
Okay, now that's fine financially, but how about from the standpoint of how long those kids will be on a bus? How is that going to change? That's hard to gauge.
Again, it's not. When you look at our zones, it's Bryan ISD has been 17 years since they've rezoned elementary schools. So what we'd have right now currently is many students who are in zones that are not completely full. So I think in essence you're probably going to see a reduction, because we do have schools, zones right now currently that have an overabundance of students in portable buildings, and you have a couple of schools that have empty classrooms. So the whole purpose is to get rid of portable buildings and then, of course, put our schools to their capacity. So I think you're going to see a wash on that as well. I don't think that you're going to see, after talking to our transportation director, a great deal of students spending more time on buses.
Your response, and Dr. Wunneburger's too, as well. Obviously, we've seen College Station have to struggle with attendance zone changing. They pay attention at that point. Can you tell me what kind of feedback you've gotten? Because we're talking about not only realignment, but then, as you say, we'll have to redraw these attendance zones.
Sure. All I can do right now, Scott, is talk to you about the past realignment, which we did and for the high schools. And I will tell you that in the entire process of rezoning our high schools, I had one negative email. So we're not doing elementary school right now, and all I've gone through at this point is high school, and we had very little opposition to that. Like I said, one email, and then it's been 17 years since we've done elementary school, so we can only go off of what our experiences are, and there will be opposition, of course, to any rezoning because students and parents want to be with their friends, and lines are always a hot topic. But it's been 17 years, and so I really can't project that.
Dr. Wunneburger, reaction to the Board of Trustees?
Well, our most recent experience with rezoning had to do when we created Rudder High School and Davila Middle School, and there were some issues at the middle school level at that time. That I actually think that this will help some of those issues, because the way things may work out is that you will have a zone for the two intermediate schools, or zones for the two intermediate schools, and then the zones, hopefully, for the middle schools will feed directly into the two high schools. So I actually think I'm hopeful that people will see that as a good step, and if we keep close to the high school lines we have now for the two middle schools, I wouldn't expect there to be any significant opposition to that.
Dr. Wallis, let's talk a little bit about the physical changes that might have to take place in these buildings as you repurpose them.
Sure. Every school in the district, excluding Neal Elementary School, won't receive anything from the bond. We just renovated it this summer, and so it's a brand new building now. But every other school in the district will receive something out of the bond. For example, Rudder High School, Mitchell, Henderson, Crockett, Kemp Carver, Jones, Davila, Rayburn, Long, all get additional classrooms. Rudder's is more of not just an adding of additional classrooms, but it'll also receive career and technology upgrades. We're number 6 in the nation in terms of our ag facility, our ag program. So they'll get some career and technology upgrades as well. But the main thing at the Rudder project, that school currently has the cafeteria in a different building than our main building. So that entire courtyard between the cafeteria and the main building is open. Those doors have to remain open, or we have to put somebody there. So it's exposed to the elements. It's exposed to anyone who wants to walk up to the building. That entire courtyard area will be enclosed, and it'll be cafeteria space and a commons area. So Rudder will be under basically one roof. Then, of course, our Ross Elementary School. What you see currently off Villa Maria, that school will be basically torn down except for the cafeteria and rebuilt completely. So you're going to get a brand new elementary school, which is Ross. And then also Stephen F. Austin Middle School, which is the one question I keep hearing over and over again is, are you tearing down SFA? And I need to make that very loud and clear to everyone. Stephen F. Austin, the current one, will not be torn down. And then, of course, there'll be roughly a brand new Stephen F. Austin Middle School. And then classroom additions to the others.
We'll talk about Stephen F. Austin in more detail, but while we're talking about this right now, is that not a historic site, or are you not basically stuck with that building?
Oh, I don't think we're stuck with it, but we want to keep it. It's a beautiful building, has a lot of history. So whether it's a historic building and whether we were stuck or not, we would want to keep it just because it's part of history. As a history major in college, I like history. And so I think people enjoy history. I think people enjoy to be able to go back to where they grew up and see the buildings that they grew up in and what they went to school. So we're very cognizant of that. And so, no, I don't think we would want to keep it anyway.
Well, and of course, there's another portion of this, and that has to do with administrative changes as well. Can you tell us about
Sure.
the consultant's report and what they said as far as administrative facilities?
Well, when they looked at this, the study, they basically came back and said the district is running inefficient because you have special education located at the Bryan Collegiate High School, and you also have DAP located in the same building as Bryan Collegiate.
Explain that so that we...
Yes, DAP is Disciplinary Alternative Education Placement or Program. So Bryan Collegiate High School, of course, has been ranked as the top 1,000 high schools the past 2 years. Just came out, it's 219 in the nation on educating students who are of poverty and color. So that building and that program at Bryan Collegiate High School has very little room to expand, because what they've done now is they've expanded into portable buildings. So what we would do is relocate our disciplinary alternative education program to Milam with MC Harris, and you would also relocate special education from that building to central administration, which would be the old SFA. You also have food service. You have, which is located at the distribution center. You have our technology.
That's out on the bypasses.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Right on the east side of Highway 6 near Bonham.
Okay.
You would have the Alpha Best, which is our after-school daycare program. They're also officed out at the distribution center. They'll be relocated to the central administration. We also have the district has a print shop, a centralized print shop, which is located at the distribution center, which will be it'll be done for our custodial staff. They don't have room for to work on equipment, so that print shop will be centrally located back to the central administration in the middle of the building instead of the far end. We will take athletics, career and technology, fine arts. All of those are located at different areas in the district, different buildings. We'll relocate them to the old SFA. You also have technology. The technology building is next door to the McDonald's over there on Texas Avenue. It too will be relocated to central administration. And so when you look at that concept, the architectural firm basically says you're very inefficient because your offices are really scattered throughout the community. They need to be centralized, so when anybody from the community has one question, they can come to one building. When there is meeting space or time for a meeting, then we're all there. Our district currently has no room for professional development. And as you know, in education, we have professional development. We have mandates we have to follow through with from Texas Education Agency. And meeting rooms, we're a very short supply of. So that's the purposes and the reasons for moving central administration to the old SFA, the reasons for that. But when you look at the actual classrooms at SFA, Dr. Jayroe, of course, is the expert on that, but the classroom specifications from TEA, our classrooms don't meet those specifications.
Okay, well, we'll get to SFA
sure.
and kind of set that aside in just
Okay.
a minute. Bill?
I think there's one missing piece I wanted to bring up about the grade realignment because we haven't explored or haven't discussed the academic benefits that are going to take place from doing that. And if Dr. Wallis or Dr. Jayroe
Jerry, you can
wants
start,
to bring
and
that
I'll
up,
if you want to start in, I can finish it. Or I can start and you can finish
it's a significant step.
Well, I'll start it out,
Okay.
polish it up. I think that having been a principal of an intermediate campus, you have an opportunity when you're dealing with older elementary school students to prepare them for what is secondary school, which is at the middle school level. And when you have pre-K students and kinder students on the same campus with fifth graders, you have a wide spectrum of expectations, both academically, behaviorally, socially, and not just for the students' best interest, but also for the parents. And so when you create that first step of moving into eventual high school education, you're giving students the opportunity to experience freedoms and self-directed opportunities, whether it's instructionally or, again, socially. From an educator's perspective, it allows us to consolidate resources, which are currently fragmented throughout the 15 elementary schools for fifth grade, and then the 4 middle schools for sixth. When you get to the middle school level, now you have the opportunity of focusing on your two things. One being UIL in particular, not just athletics but academics, and your fine arts competitions. But you also have the opportunity to look at high school credit offerings, which can begin at the 7th grade level. So you're truly creating pure programs for students in their best interest. At a varying pace, so that when they get to high school, they're truly ready for 9 through 12 and graduation.
And I would continue on that line that when a student leaves 5th grade and goes to middle school, they leave a as Dr. Jayroe said, a very structured environment where they're walked to and from. They're pretty much told and expected to do certain things all day long. When they go to middle school as a 6th grade student, then pretty much what you have is a bell will ring and students are expected to then go to class. Now, that's a lot of freedom for a 11 and 12-year-old. So going back to your academic question, what you see across not just Bryan ISD but across schools that are aligned like we are, what you will find is 6th grade discipline referrals tend to spike because they just don't know how to behave yet. They're still going through changes. They're 6th graders. And so what we were hoping to do through this alignment was to make sure that our 5th grade and our 6th grade students were in one campus and begin to teach these individuals how to be little adults. And so in 5th grade it may be more structured, and then you work your way through a less structured environment. But the whole point of the academics is to ensure that students aren't in school suspension. We can build better relationships with our kids, and they're in class more. And if they're in class more, they're going to learn more. We don't want them out of class. The next component of that, instructionally, I would say to you is with 15 elementary schools in Bryan ISD right now, across the state of Texas, you will find 5th grade scores will spike. So they're relatively level in 3rd grade, and they're relatively level in 4th grade. But in 5th grade, you see a big spike in in test scores, which while I'm on the air, I'd like to say I'm adamantly against high-stakes testing, by the way. Thought I'd throw that in there, Scott. Thank
Sure,
you.
But it's still a reality.
But it's still a reality, and it's still the world that we live in, and we have to play by the set of rules that the state of Texas gives us. So you do have a spike in 5th grade. And then across Texas, you see a huge dip in test scores in 6th grade. So I love the question, because what takes place is in a district the size of Bryan, we're roughly the 65th largest school district in the state of Texas out of 1,040. We have 15 elementary schools, and so when we look at individual students and look at their individual scores and their individual needs, is what Bryan does now, very closely, I might add. When you have 15 elementary schools and then you have programs like Odyssey, Inquire, and then you have Kickstart, and you have some of these things that people can transfer for. These 6th grade teachers get students and receive students from all 15 elementary schools. It is virtually impossible for a 5th grade teacher to talk to a 6th grade teacher about individual instructional challenges and strengths that an individual has. So now when you put the 5th graders and the 6th graders together on one campus, you truly have the vertical alignment. You truly have dialogue between the 5th grade teacher and the 6th grade teacher, because they're going to go to the same school. And then we can talk about what this individual's strong suits are and what his struggles are. And then we create an individual education plan for those kids and those students, and then it's going to benefit those students academically. But right now, being so large, it's very fragmented, and that conversation about each individual child doesn't take place, because one teacher in 6th grade may virtually have 15 kids from 15 different elementary schools.
Okay. Do we need to take a break? Everybody okay?
I'm great.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next thing then. The decision to make this an all-or-nothing bond issue. First of all, I guess let's talk about the discussion of that, maybe first in the Board of Trustees, Dr. Wunneburger, and then we'll move over to the application of it.
Well, the recommendation brought to the Board of Trustees by the Strategic Planning, the Facilities Planning Committees, was to have one election. And by and large, the Board of Trustees accepted the recommendations of that committee. It was not a decision directed by the board. It was a recommendation that we followed.
Why did you support it?
Because it seemed like the best idea, and I'm not sure I can recall the specific arguments made to us regarding that decision, but you don't want to fragment. I don't think you want a cafe, style election to choose the things you like, because so many of them are interrelated. One requires the other. There is no question that if we don't pass this bond, the grade realignment will not happen. And that's just one example, and perhaps someone else can suggest some other linkages like that. But if you had an election where you could pick the things you liked, there's a high, I would say probably close to an absolute probability that there would be a component that was not approved that was critical to in the entire kind of blueprint of moving ahead.
But wouldn't anybody say that who is in favor of there have to be some sort of attributes within something this large that people are not going to be happy with? So I don't know. Let's talk about what are the dollars that are being spent, or where are they being spent in areas within this bond issue that do not directly address the education of the student?
That'd be zero, because everything that we do involves the instruction of the student. So the answer to that question is zero. Facilities
improvements, though, that might not be within the classroom?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question. I hope everybody listens closely to it, because the fact of the matter is, if an air conditioner goes out, I promise you the moms and the dads are going to call. When the plumbing goes awry, I promise you we get the phone call. When a student who is ADA non-compliant, if we have an ADA non-issue, we hear about it. And so I asked the question to the Facilities Committee about that very thing you asked about, why the all or nothing. And here's what they said. There is nothing in this bond package that is fluff. There is nothing in this bond package that the Facilities Committee thought wasn't needed right now. When you look at what we're asking for in this bond package, is we're asking for many upgrades that are those Category 1 issues that we talked about previously. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about things that through the years, through budget cuts, that we've not had an opportunity to continue to fix. Roofs, for example. What I would like the people to understand is that Bryan ISD, out of the general fund, out of the fund balance, last year spent $3.5 million at Neal Elementary School to renovate it completely. We spent $750,000 on a chiller at Bryan High School. And so, yes, for people out there, a chiller is an air conditioner, and it costs $750,000. we put on 2 roofs, one at Branch and one at Sam Houston Elementary School, both of which cost $1 million. So when you begin looking at a $132 million bond, if you just did roofs, that would be $32 million. And so it's things like that. It's things that we have to keep updated. We have to upgrade. We have sidewalks. We have things that are, over the years when they were built, are unlevel. So an individual that is handicapped in a wheelchair or needs help assistance, those things are broke. Those things are, and so we've got to continue those things. We've got to move forward to fix those types of things. So the answer to your question is the amount of money would be zero.
And the explanation extends into the consolidation at SFA with the additional meeting spaces for professional development and the other things you've already talked about.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I would say the answer is zero.
Well, and I think, to follow on that point, if you have to spend the district's money to find meeting spaces, then those are resources that can go into teaching or instruction in some fashion, some other way.
Scott, Bill, let me give you an example. We have the Texas Education Agency came down this past year with new student expectations in math. So there are so many more student expectations just in math alone that right now we have to train our teachers continually on the new expectations from the state of Texas. And we have no place. We spend, when you begin to look, we have to spend monies to go around our community to have any staff development. Excuse me. We have to, if any professional development that we have, much of it has to be done off-site. When if we have it ourselves, people will just come right there and we don't have to spend rent or rent a place to have our professional development.
Because we have the time, and not every person listening will have interest in it, but I think we probably ought to kind of drill down a little bit in each level as to, in the elementary schools, in the intermediate schools, in the middle schools, what kind of things will be happening on each of those campuses so people can understand as their children move into those campuses what they can expect as far as improvement.
Now, this is one of the things that I want to preface before we answer, that bond passes in November. You begin the planning process in December, January. And so for me to forecast 1 year out before we start building, I'd be remiss. Because what we have in terms of money for one school, a chiller might go out. And guess what? We've got to pay for that chiller. So when I say those types of things, I want the listeners to understand and the voters to understand that for me to say you're going to get X right now, and in 1 year when it comes time, that can change based on any circumstance.
Sure.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I guess to answer your question, I don't know if I understand your question as well as
what I want to know
to.
is, let's talk about the elementary sites.
Okay.
What's going to happen at elementary? Then let's move to the intermediate sites, and then
Okay.
we'll do the middle school sites.
All right. So what you have for elementary schools is right at $38 million worth of upgrades, additions, and so forth. And through that, what you'll find is that Mitchell Elementary School, Henderson, Crockett, Kemp Carver, Jones will all get classroom additions. So they'll actually expand in size. And then through that, then you have things like, for example, we have at Branch Elementary School, we have sidewalk repairs because we have some ADA accessible things we need to look into. And then you have things like at Fannin Elementary School. Fannon's an old historic building, and one of the things we want to do at that school right there is put a new roof on. But on any given day, if that chiller goes out, then you've got a great deal of that money going to be spent for a chiller. So it's things of that nature. You have renovating some restrooms. Many of our restrooms need plumbing. We need to change the plumbing. And so it's things like that. So at the elementary school level, you're looking right at $38 million for elementary school additions, renovations, and expansions.
And the largest line item in there, of course, is the rebuilding of Ross Elementary.
That's correct. And then Ross Elementary School.
And that's essentially putting up a whole new campus.
It's a brand new building, yes, sir. And you're looking at $15.5 million is the estimated price right now to rebuild Ross.
And how many students will be on that campus?
600?
We're building it for 600 to 650.
And how many are on there right now, just so people would understand?
310.
Okay.
So it'll double in size.
It'll be bigger.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
All right. And then for the intermediate schools, middle schools, high schools, let me get to the back page. Then you're looking at $58.7 million.
For those three?
For those, well, no. This would be for all secondary schools. So now what
Okay.
you're getting is you're getting Davila
All right.
Middle School, Sam Rayburn, Jane Long, and then a brand new Stephen F. Austin Middle School, which will basically be raised. But again, make that very clear, we're not tearing down the old SFA.
The Art Deco that everybody has seen will still be there.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
All right. High schools?
Now that was all secondary.
Okay.
So I didn't break
You
that
don't have
down
it
by
breaking-
grade.
okay.
I don't have.
Well, let me talk to you just for a minute then while we're on the high schools. The blue and silver campus, that's a lot of square footage right there.
Very much.
How much of that is being utilized right now, and are there some other applications that you could be using?
Right. I'm glad you asked that question as well, because what we've done is we've taken Hammond Oliver, which was unutilized space at Bryan High School in the blue. That
For
was
those who aren't familiar with what Hammond Oliver is.
Hammond Oliver is a program we have in Bryan ISD for students who are interested in science, medical, vet tech.
Used to be at the old Bryan Hospital, and then you
Correct.
moved over there.
And that's where our Mary Catherine Harris School of Choice is today.
Right. Mhm.
So we looked, and to expand Mary Catherine Harris, we needed more space. We needed to serve some students that were overaged, undercredited. So we moved that program, expanded it, and moved Hammond Oliver over to Bryan High School because we did have additional space. So that space has taken up the second floor of the blue campus, the far end of it. So it's got several classrooms. It has more classrooms than it had previously, again, to expand that program. We've also, because there were a few extra classrooms here and there, we worked with Blinn, and Blinn College is now going to take up space in Bryan High School for our dual credit students. So again, because our students don't have the ability to travel and go all over, we're going to bring Blinn College into our school, and so then that school is going to be about right when you do our MOU with Blinn College.
Okay. Then I guess we take on the elephant in the room now.
Sure.
Let's move to Stephen F. Austin.
Sure.
To understand what that is, and also what your plan is as far as other properties that the school district owns and what you might do to turn those around. What's your plan there?
Well, first off, Stephen F. Austin Administration Building, and I was asked the other day what the name's going to be, and I said it's a little premature because it's 4 years down the road before we even move into it. Stephen F. Austin, as I said earlier in the interview, will be centrally located. It's centrally right in the middle of town. And so when you look at Stephen F. Austin, it's basically to refurbish an older building. One of the complaints that you hear across Texas, and not just in Bryan, but across Texas, is that we have so many administrators in our school system. We have too many administrators. There's too many people, too many chiefs, and not enough Indians. We want lower class size. We want more teachers. Well, and for those people out there that have that train of thought, guess what? So does everybody in this room. We all want lower class size. We all want more teachers. That's a fact. But for us to get to the viewers or to the listeners out there, the administrative cost ratio in Bryan ISD for campus administration, which is principals, assistant principals, and so forth, we are at 2.3% of our budget. The average in Texas is at 2.9. So those are facts. And then you say, well, there's too many people in central office. There's too many superintendents. Well, in Bryan ISD, we're at 0.6% of our budget is based on central administration staff. And the average is 1%. So Bryan ISD is not overloaded or what they would call, many people call top heavy. I think what is happening is that you have a lot of individuals who've been in our wonderful community forever, but it's not that small school district any longer. Today, I heard that Bryan is the 17th fastest growing city in the nation. So we're growing with all the things that are taking place at Texas A&M, with all the things with the Bio Corridor, with all the things that are taking place at the SEC. You're seeing a community that's growing, and Bryan is growing. And so the facts are we're not, quote, top heavy.
Let's talk about a timeline. Let's say starting January 1st, 2015. The bond issue has passed.
Okay.
Let's get a timeline on Stephen F. Austin, what happens there, and when it happens.
All right. Well, November of 14 is your election.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to draw this out.
That's fine.
You go from November of 14 is the election, and then you're roughly going all the way to June or July of 2015 is the planning process.
This is because you have to get an architect, you have to get
Correct.
plans drawn?
Correct. We have to go through the entire design process, which has not been done. Many people, when they look at your picture, if you will, please make sure that people understand that's a draft, and that's only a draft. That does not mean that's what it's going to look like. It's just a draft to see if we could fit things on properties and to make for sure that we had enough capacity and for space and for pricing. So you would plan the document planning from November of 14 to July of 15. And then what you would roughly have is either June, July of 15 through August of 16, you would have construction of virtually all the elementary schools and, of course, Stephen F. Austin, the new middle school. Now, those campuses should be finished by the August 16 school year, the elementary schools. Now, the whole thing in the grade realignment issue that as people vote, the grade realignment won't take place then because Stephen F. Austin Middle School will not be complete. It's going to take 1.5 to 2 years to build. So then you're talking about the August of 16 all the way to 17. So you're talking May of 17 before Stephen F. Austin Middle School would be occupable. So you're really talking about the grade realignment taking place in the 17-18 school year.
Okay. So people can understand that so that they can see that. And then, of course, there are always chillers that can go out during that
That's
time.
a true statement, Scott. Thank you.
But in reality, and we have a conception here, but again, let's talk numbers. How many students do you anticipate, for instance, on that new renovated SFA campus?
1,200. 11 to 1,200 students. It's what it's being built for. And we're building it for 11 or 1,200 students because of growth. What we don't want to do is build a school and then the very next year go, oops, and have to put portable buildings. What we're trying to do in this bond election is be proactive and look ahead. When you do these types of projects, you have to understand that the decisions that are made today are going to affect Bryan ISD and the city and the community for 50 years. So this is not something that's been flippantly thought through. It's something that's going to impact our great city for many, many years to come.
Amy Drozd is here.
What's the current 7th and 8th grade population? Because that's what SFA will become eventually, right?
We're looking at both of them being very similar in size. Mm-hmm. So 7th and 8th, we're looking at about 2,000.
That's the current population, 7th and 8th grade, within the district. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Amy Drozd is here. She's the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Obviously, timing in the marketplace is important when it comes to this. We know that there's going to be inflation that is going to be part of this. How has that been factored into the dollars that we're talking about for this bond?
The estimates that we've gotten from our architect, they did factor in inflation. We have a line item specifically for that, so we think we've covered that in some of our planning.
But also, if we're the 17th fastest growing area in the nation, there's going to be inflation as far as numbers of students as well. So how do we factor that in?
That's true. We have a demographer that we have worked with a number of years. She has been very accurate in her forecast for us. The facility committee used the estimated enrollment for 2018 when they did their work. And then we made sure as we put the additional classrooms on each of those buildings that none of those buildings were maxed out at that enrollment. We still had a little bit of capacity beyond that.
Okay. Everybody else in here is on the education side of this equation. You're on the business side of this equation. You've got some areas that you're having to take into consideration that our listeners and viewers may not quite understand. What are some of the things, as you put this bond issue out there and it passes, what are the other challenges that we see from a business standpoint that BISD will face?
Well, of course, planning out the dollars that is projected and making sure as we put these bonds out there for sale that I have them sequenced correctly. We'll be looking at cash flows because I don't want to sell too early and waste taxpayer money on interest, nor the district. So we have that. We also have the impact on the property tax rate, of course, that would be in 2015. Fall of 2015 is when that would take place. So we have those estimates as well that we have to factor in. Also, in part of this, the reason we've been able to estimate a 6-cent property tax increase is that there's a number of bond issues that we have that are callable in the very near future. And interest rates have declined since we issued those. So we're going to be refunding a lot of those bonds or refinancing them.
Well, just so you know, the president of the Dallas Fed, I'm sure, has said that interest rates are about to go up again. So the timing is not necessarily ideal for that. We haven't really talked.
Can I interject one
please.
point here? Is Bryan ISD is blessed with probably one of the best. Well, absolutely one of the best CFOs, chief financial officers in the state for public schools. And I don't want to minimize one of the points Ms. Drozd just made. We are going out for $132 million based upon a 6 cents tax increase. Find any other district in the state who is able to do that and let me know about it because I haven't seen one.
Let's talk a little bit about transportation needs. As far as what the future will be, because obviously your fleet gets older, and again, we may be having to move kids farther. We're not sure. We think we may not have to, but we may have to move more kids farther. And how do you factor that into the equation?
Well, a number of years ago, in one of our bond issues, we actually had some funds in that bond issue for buses. Fortunately, some of the state funding systems have changed and put some money back in or replaced some of what that they took away. So the past 3 years, we've been able to build those bus replacements back into the general fund. We look at a 12 to 14 year replacement cycle, and with that we need to replace 7 to 8 buses a year, and this will be the 3rd year in a row we've been able to do that. So one of my goals is to continue long range planning and make sure that that continues.
There is some property that the school district owns right now. Give us an idea of what that property is and how much money do you believe you'll be able to get out of those locations?
Well, right now we're in the process of getting some estimates on those properties, so I don't have numbers yet on that. Mm-hmm. But 2 of the properties are where the MC Harris Alternative School is, right in the medical corridor. So we're expecting at least some interest in that property. Our administration building.
How big is
downtown.
that? Do you know right off the top of your
I
head?
don't know.
Okay.
It's
okay.
actually 2 buildings,
Okay.
The old hospital as well as medical offices next door. The administration building downtown, right across from the courthouse, there's a lot of offices and need for offices, so we feel like that would be a fairly marketable site. Our technology building is not far from there. So historically, school buildings in and of themselves are not real marketable. There's not a whole lot of people looking for them, but I don't think the ones that we'll be putting out there, fit that definition.
Certainly. Okay. Let's take a look at the Stephen F. Austin campus, and we've talked about how, again, this seems to be the keystone project, but Brandon Jayroe, you're the SFA principal right now. Let's talk about what it will be like as you transition. Obviously, they'll be building a new school right there behind you, and let's talk about the challenges that you face there.
Well, I think anytime that you're going to have a project of that magnitude going on while you're having school, you want to make sure that noise level, student safety being first, and making sure that students can access the building. I think that in my experience of in working in situations like that, I think that it's manageable as long as you consolidate classrooms as best you can. We've had the opportunity of being able to consolidate our classes into the main building this year, with the exception of our electives, our PE and fine arts, which would be accessed through the civic and the gyms. So I think it's going to be manageable for what we're currently working with. From a noise perspective, I think that Again, my experience of it, I have not seen there to be significant issues, whether it's testing days or areas of the building that might, with extra windows or whatever else might lend themselves to being a distraction. I think that we could come up with an alternate plan to ensure that wasn't going on when kids were there.
This comes to the top of my head. That's what I like about being able to do this. Amy, if you'd speak to energy efficiency in these buildings, how does that get factored in?
Well, we always, when we look at renovating a facility, even Neil, just this last summer, we look at what we can do energy-wise, what lighting replacements we can do, and what the payback might be on that. We're always looking for a 5-year or less payback period when we do any sort of upgrade or renovation in the way of energy. Of course, any new facility, we can't afford to be state-of-the-art and have a green building. The cost there, you're looking at, could be 20 years or more to get the cost back. So we want to be energy efficient, but we also realize that the cost to be totally a green facility is not kind of where we can be.
Okay.
I want to take a step back on SFA to what's wrong with the current school. It was great when I went. Why do we need a new SFA?
You didn't go to SFA, I'm just
gonna
saying.
say
But I know what you mean, though. All right.
Well, that's an excellent question. I think that for you or for any of our community members, I would encourage you to come to the campus and take a tour with us so that I can show you firsthand. The SFA is functional as a place for kids to come, and I love the building, having been there for a year myself. The fact of the matter is that roughly 20 to 25% of the classrooms in the main building do not meet standard classroom size requirements for our kids. They're smaller than a standard classroom.
Who makes those requirements?
Texas Education Agency.
Okay.
So as we talk about things like growth, we're not able to grow a full classroom into some of these areas, and so that would be the first thing I would point out. The second is with regards to accessibility for ADA compliance or otherwise, our students have to travel a long distance at SFA. We're the only middle school campus that really needs a 4-minute passing period, and so a student that has to utilize the elevator, whether they're temporarily injured or have a wheelchair or otherwise, have to literally walk across the entire campus to get to their class that would be on the first floor to the third floor, just to be able to access 2 elevators. The second thing is that we have 30 doors right now that have to remain unlocked throughout the entire school day, and unfortunately, in the time that we live, that's just not safe. We manage those, and we have what I believe to be a solid emergency operations plan for monitoring and maintaining high vigilance. But again, unfortunately, in this day and time, it's just not an ideal situation for our kids. The other thing that I would like to draw everyone's attention to is the fact that even with us consolidating our classes into the main building, every day, every one of our students have to exit the main building just to go to their classes. And so regardless of the elements, the students are going to have to be out in that. And it's a beautiful courtyard area, it truly is, but it's just not in the best interest for safety and efficiency for our kids.
As you repurpose that building, it's been a while since I've been in there, but you've got high ceilings. Do you have any asbestos? Do you have any other issues that you're going to have to look at that because of the age of the building simply?
Well, as they go in and they begin to look at the building, as they go in and begin to renovate parts of that building, then I'm sure, just like any renovation project, you're going to find things you didn't know were there. And all of that money is put into the project.
Is there asbestos in that building?
I don't know.
I'm sure there is. Every time we've done something.
Okay, I'm a little bothered by I'm sure there is, when in fact that could really cost a lot of money, and you don't know that yet.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, when they did that, I didn't ask that question about asbestos. Now, as we look into that, then we said, here's what we're going to do with that building, and the things are, we're not tearing down everything in that building. Once you uncover it, once you uncover asbestos, once you find it, then it's exposed, then you have to take it out. But the high ceilings and things of that nature, we're not going to take those out of the library. We're not going to make the SFA building a Taj Mahal. A lot of all we're going to do is, because those classrooms are so small, we can put 2 or 3 offices in a classroom with those portable walls. So we're not going to be tearing it all out and tearing it down. So when we began to talk about this project, that wasn't the biggest consideration, because people don't want to spend a ton of money on a central administration. The board doesn't want to. I don't want to. The facilities committee doesn't want to. So we're not going to be exposing those things. We're just not. You're talking about paint. You're talking about lifting up carpet if need be, if the carpet is in bad shape. But we're not renovating that entire building to be a Taj Mahal. It needs to be a working building where we can get our jobs done. But the gist of the money, most of the money is going to the classrooms.
I'm just concerned. We watched this with the Expo Center. X number of dollars, and then they had to back it back down and not do what they had intended to do.
Right.
And only years later were they able to rebuild that or get up to the point they wanted. I'm concerned with this building, the same situation that we're talking about. I understand you don't want a Taj Mahal, but we need to answer what really are the real world expenses to make this the administration building that you're envisioning it to be.
When they looked at the building, when PBK came in and looked at the building and did their complete study, we told them what we wanted. We told them they're the experts, not us. They build buildings, we educate children. We basically told them what our expectations were. These are the things that we need done to this building, which would be roof being fixed, air conditioning being fixed, restroom renovations being fixed, and they went in and investigated that. They came back as the experts, because I'm not an expert, and they said, these are the things that we've discovered, these are the things that we will have to do, and this is what it's going to cost us roughly if the bond passes in November of 2014. So we take the expertise of the architects, we take the expertise of the contractors, and we told them what we needed done. They're the ones that actually went into the roofs. They're the ones that went under the, the SFA has a basement. They're the ones that went underneath there. They inspected everything and came back with that price. And that's what we have to do is trust the architects and the builders.
Bill, you have anything else?
Go. Before we go to Bill, I would point out that if you put 20 or 30 people in a room talking about remodeling an old building, somebody's going to ask that question. And it certainly came up in the facilities committee meetings. And we were, I believe, assured by the architect that contingency was built into the plan. So
Yes, we were. I agree.
And
So
you got to
it-
remember, I wasn't in those facilities committees meetings, so,
Sure.
So
I only went to 2.
Okay, I was asking the wrong guy then. I should have. Okay.
Excellent question,
Yeah,
but you know, I'm going to guarantee that there's asbestos in that building because it's so old. But
It was built in 1938.
Sure.
You know, I think the contingency is planned for. You know, ideally that money could.
Yeah, my concern
Not
is
be
not that the
spent
asbestos is there. My concern is
Yeah.
the contingency, and if
Yeah.
it sounds like then that's been done. Bill, anything else that you have?
Not on SFA.
Dr. Wallis,
I have one other point. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to keep interrupting, but Dr. Jayroe talked about the safety of the students during the construction. First of all, when you talk about the configure of SFA currently and the size of the physical size of the rooms and not meeting standard, addressing that goes back to Bill's earlier question about positive educational outcomes. We're trying to provide the best opportunity for positive educational outcomes. And the question that you know, occasionally somebody will say, well, just remodel the school. Well, first of all, to do that and to take down load-bearing walls is more expensive than building a new school, especially when you consider that we can repurpose that school and use it efficiently for something else. And then the last thing is, everybody who suggests that never thinks, where are you going to put the students while they can't be in that building? And all of that has been addressed in this plan.
We haven't brought up the Civic Auditorium if somebody wants to talk about what's going to happen there.
Civic Auditorium will also be renovated. Civic is a building that was given to the school district by the city of Bryan years ago, 1989,
90s.
in the early 90s. And so that building itself will get new lighting. We will look at the acoustical sounds of that building will be replaced. You're looking at a sound system and lighting. But now it's important to note that Civic Auditorium will actually be built, or the new SFA will be built adding on to the old Civic Auditorium. So we're using that building. So we're not tearing down SFA. And the reason it was brought up of raising that building and leaving it open and leaving that vacant, the reason we didn't, again, going back to cost efficiency, it's a 1,600 seat facility. To build a 1,600 seat facility somewhere else in the district would cost much more than what we're going to do to renovate the project. It's not just an SFA facility, it's a district facility. It'll be our performing arts center for the district. So not only will SFA use it, but any school in the district can use it. And currently, Bryan High School uses SFA Civic Auditorium for all of their productions because Bryan High School doesn't have a facility large enough for any of their productions. So basically, Bryan High School takes that over about 3 months out of the year. And that's where they have their productions. And so that's why we decided not to tear it down. And it's just too big of a and nice enough building. We don't need to tear it down. We just need to remodel it and upgrade it.
We talked a little bit about the price and what it means to property owners. Do we need to give any more detail about that?
Well, on your handout that we've given you, I think you've even put online it's 6 cents per $100 of value for your home. So for a $100,000 home, and we use two ranges, one $100,000 and one $300,000 home. For a $100,000 home, it would be a $60 a year increase in your taxes, which when we take that out, it's $5 a month or 17 cents a day. For a $300,000 house, it's $180 a year. It's $15 a month and 49 cents a day. And Dr. Wunneburger has already alluded to the fact that the reason we can get $132 million for 6 cents is the fact that Ms. Drozd has done a very good job of paying down our debt and watching it. But I also want to give credit to the Board of Trustees. And I want to ask Amy to talk a little bit about the variable rates and what we have done to make for sure that our debt is paid down a little sooner than most school districts and what they have done.
Sure. In 2009, one of our last bond issues, I approached our board along with our financial advisors of the idea of doing a portion of that bond as a variable rate. Similar to your home interest, if you do a variable rate, usually you can get a slightly lower interest rate. But the other advantage is in a market where you're looking at rates declining, not only did you get a little better rate on that portion then, but in 3 years, we could refund that with no penalties or prepayments like you would any other refunding at the lower interest rate. And we did that. This past year, that particular issue went from over 3% to about 2.8%. So that was good, but it also gives us the ability, as we see some fluctuations in our property values, to pay things off early. And they've been very supportive in that initiative, and that's also helping us stay at that 6 cent rate. So.
Sure.
And then at the end of the day, for those who are 65 and older, their tax rate, their school tax rate is froze. And so they're going to pay the same whether they vote yes or whether they vote no. And I've had seniors ask me, well, Dr. Wallis, why should I vote for it? And I said, well, because somebody did it for you when you were growing up. Somebody did what they were doing to help you out. And it's important to note that if this bond were to fail, the grade realignment is we can't do it. We're going to continue to stay in portable buildings. But through this whole process, we need to remember that steel, concrete, construction prices, all of those are on the increase every day. And we are tied to the Houston market. Houston ISD passed a bond last year for $1.78 billion with a B dollars. Cy-Fair passed one last year for $1.2 billion. You have Katy ISD up the road, which is not far, is going out for, I think, $800 million bond. Fort Bend ISD has said they're going out for a bond. So the point is, if this bond doesn't pass, it's going to just the pricing is just going to increase over the years, and the need still remains the same. And so I just want to make sure, but the 65-year-old and older seniors, their tax rate is frozen, so they're going to pay the same whether they vote yes or no.
For the rest of the property owners in Bryan ISD, what's the length of the bond issue?
It ranges. Of course, if someone wanted to invest in this, we have some maturities that could be 3 years, but probably looking at a